All right, here we go. Thursday, June 8th, 12 p.m. in Holistic Caring Network, discover a path to wellness, integrating psychedelics and holistic coaching. So we have Coach Michael Brooks here from DIYECS Health, and he's going to pronounce it better than me. I've been working with Coach Michael, since the beginning of the year, and we have been doing having some amazing breakthroughs and learning about psychedelics as medicine. So he is the founder of DIYECS Health. He's a certified holistic coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. He educates and empowers clients on psychedelic medicines for biopsychosocial spiritual healing. His mission is to help people get into the Thrive Zone, guiding on the safe use of entheogens for healing. Coach Michael's personal experience with microdosing LSD in 2015 helped him to break his alcohol addiction and kickstart his journey towards lifelong health and wellness. Today, he's a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, in the best shape of his life and ready to help clients achieve their goals. So like I had said before, as clinicians, we do have a responsibility to educate on safe consumption, as well as how we take care of our endocannabinoid system and our endocannabinoid dome when using psychedelics as medicine, whether it be microdosing or on larger journeys. So today's webinar will be on Coach Michael's introduction to psychedelics, and we'll follow up with a Q&A. When this recording is done, it will be posted in the network, and we will also have a copy of the PDF presentation of the slides that you're going to be seeing today. So I'd like to give a big warm welcome to Coach Michael. Very excited to have you here today. I'm going to put myself on mute and let you take over. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box as they come up, and we'll make sure that we go through them at the end of the session. All right, Coach Michael, you're on.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And, I'm just honored to be here today, and I'm so appreciative and grateful for everyone's time. And, I really hope to add some value to this conversation as psychedelic medicines move forward. So let's go ahead and let's get this rocking. Let's do this. Actually, perfect. All righty. Can y'all see the presentation screen?
Yes.
Okay. So as Sherry mentioned, I am the founder of DIYECS Health, and that really stands for Do It Yourself, Enjoy Consistent Success. And that is my approach. I really try to empower all of my clients to live the best life possible. And sometimes that means incorporating psychedelic medicine. As Sherry thoughtfully mentioned, I did use LSD along with the ketogenic diet to cure my alcohol use disorder in 2015. I'm a board certified health and wellness coach through the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. And I'm also a humble member of the Association of Entheogenic Practitioners. And we are a spiritual ethical organization that is really designed to provide safe access to psychedelic experiences, really under the utilization of our First Amendment, our freedom of religion. My tagline is Magic Meets Science. I really believe that these molecules, these compounds, these entheogens help me connect to my higher power. But for today's presentation, I'm really going to stick to the science. I believe there's room for both, that this mystical, spiritual experience, as well as what's happening physiologically and biologically within our bodies when we consume these molecules. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. This is not medical advice. By and large part, these molecules are still illegal in vast majorities of the country. So I definitely encourage you to be aware of your local laws, and we'll just get that out of the way. The presentation, I've broken it down into really 4 components. First, we're just going to understand psychedelics, a general overview, Section 2 is This Is Your Brain on Drugs. That is a little tongue-in-cheek play on the DARE videos of the late 80s and early 90s. We're going to talk about what is happening with the research and beyond. And then the final component of this is a question and answer segment. So let's dig in. So first, we're going to talk about serotonergic psychedelics. I always have a tough time with that word. So from now on, we're going to refer to them as SPs. We'll define psychedelic. What it comes from is the mind or soul, and delios means to manifest or bring forward. These are also called classic psychedelics. They're also called tryptamines, and they include LSD, psilocybin, DMT, mescaline. DMT is also the active ingredient in ayahuasca, but it has a MOA inhibitor added to it that really extends the duration of effect. And these molecules, these psychedelics, are really known for how they interact with our serotonin receptor 2A. That is our 5-hydroxytryptamine 2A receptor. So the first one we're going to discuss is lysergic acid dithylamide 25. The 25, it is the 25th in the sequence of the mold of ergot that this gentleman, Dr. Albert Hofmann, discovered in 1937. The first intentional use happened 5 years later in 1942, where Dr. Hofmann decided to ingest about 500 micrograms. This happened on April 19th, which is we refer to as Bicycle Day. Some of you may be familiar. Since its discovery, we believe about 50 million people worldwide have safely used LSD. So if you think about the 60s, the 70s, the US, Europe, Australia, westernized countries, et cetera, we believe about 50 million individual users. There's also some evidence that this molecule goes back to the pre-Christian Greek time. So the mysteria, the mysteries at Eleusis, through archaeological excavation, they have found remnants of ergot on the vessels that they were drinking potentially a beverage, a beer, wine, mead type substance. There's an amazing book called The Immortality Key that really addresses that. Why I bring that up and why that it's important. So this pre-Christian religion, if you look at the dates, it's actually lasted longer than current day Catholicism is. So long history of psychedelics or potentially psychedelic substances being used. Also really interesting is LSD really brought forth the birth of psychopharmacology. So LSD's, how it affects its effect and also its structural similarity to serotonin really brought forth the idea that our brain was based on neurochemicals, and serotonin and LSD were discovered roughly at the same time in history. So that really, LSD really gave birthplace to our modern thought of handling mental disorders through the form of pharmacology. Previously, it was electroshock therapy or ETC, electroconvulsive therapy. So that was the gold standard back then. I know that's still utilized today, but LSD had a huge role in bringing forth the pharmacology aspect. And just so you can see, so here we have the molecule LSD and serotonin. So the bolded part of LSD is actually, it's the exact same as serotonin. So that's why these molecules, and that's how they interact. Up next is psilocybin. It is actually converted, the psychoactive material becomes psilocin in our GI tract. And what we do, right, so this phosphate grouping here is actually enzymes break it down. It's called dephosphorylation. And once we remove this, you can sort of see, if we were to go back, oops, it looks very similar to serotonin once again. So right here. Also, Dr. Albert Hoffman first isolated psilocybin from the Psilocybe cubensis mushroom in 1957. Mushrooms that contain psilocybin are found on every continent in the world, with the exception of Antarctica. So they are very prevalent, both in modern world and in our ancient world. And this information at the bottom, this includes both psilocybin and LSD. So by the mid 70s, over 1,000 published articles with more than 40,000 research subjects. I want us to remember that when we go into the third part of this discussion, where we really look at current day research, and we can sort of compare and contrast what happened in the early days, what we call the first wave of psychedelics, and what is currently happening now, and what we call the third wave of psychedelic medicine. This is a really powerful image for me. And this is the one part where I'm going to sort of vary off of the science. So this is a sand painting, and it's in Algeria, Northern Africa. It's called Mushroom Dancers, and it's believed to be between 7,000 and 9,000 years old. As you can see, it depicts more or less a mushroom ceremony. And I want to be clear, like, this is so ancient. This is before modern language, right? This is before Latin. This is before Greece. This is before English, Spanish. Like this is so ancient. We weren't even speaking modern languages yet. And yet we understood that there was an significance to ingesting these mushrooms and having ceremony. And I really feel like it's part of our DNA. It's part of our human beingness to really, have the opportunity to interact with this plant medicine. Up next, we have ketamine. Ketamine is technically classified as a dissociative anesthetic. We're going to address that terminology a little bit later, but it is an analog of PCP, and it was first done in the 60s. It had an amazing safety profile, and when used as an anesthetic, the FDA approved it, and it's a Schedule III narcotic now on our list of scheduled substances. And in 1985, the World Health Organization put it on its list of essential medicines. It was either one of or the most commonly used drug as an anesthetic during the Vietnam War. I think that's really interesting for us to think about how, over during the anti-war movement that was going on, a lot of LSD and psilocybin was being used, which was eventually outlawed, yet our soldiers were getting something in the same sort of a vein that ended up becoming medicalized. And then also, for the past 50 years, international therapists, some here in the underground US, have been experimenting with ketamine as part of, psychotherapy. So there's a long history of it being used, really high safety profile, really kind of an amazing medicine in a lot of ways. What's really unique about ketamine, a couple of things: it can be administered orally through a troche. There's a nasal spray. You can do it IV or intramuscular. And what ketamine is, it's a racemic mixture of these two enantiomers. So an enantiomer being a mirror image of each molecule. And so it's mixed together, and that's how it's administered, except for the S-ketamine. So this molecule right here has actually been patented by Johnson & Johnson, and it is sold under the brand name Spravato. Just to give you an indication, in 2022, Spravato sales globally were about $380 million. So we have this drug that's being used, being researched, and now it is been sort of, part of it has been being utilized by pharmaceuticals, a pharma company, in the use and treatment of depression. That also brings me to, that is the only approved version of ketamine for depression. So what we see in a lot of these clinics that's going on is the use of ketamine in off-label, right? So it's being prescribed as one thing, but it's actually being used in a therapeutic way. So these clinics that do IV, IM, or even some of the lodgings or some of the telehealth companies, they're using ketamine off-label. Up next, we have methylene dioxymethamphetamine, which we will refer to as MDMA moving forward. It's an enactogen, which means to touch within. You'll also hear it referred to as a empathogen, meaning it creates empathy. We're trying to steer away from that language because of the word pathogen, right? Now that COVID's happened, most people assume a pathogen being a virus has a negative connotation. So we're trying to change the language around MDMA and really use this entactogen language. Once again, it's also a racemic mixture of these two mirror image molecules. Why I bring that up is it would not surprise me in the near future, very similar to ketamine, how Spravato became patented, that one of these versions, one of these enantiomers of MDMA becomes patented, right? The S version or the R version, I'm not sure. But like I said, that would not surprise me in the least, because, you know, the reality is all of these molecules are no longer, or they're all off IP. MDMA, you know, it's no longer patent protected, the same way with ketamine, etc. So very similarly structured to an amphetamine and also mescaline. And so that is why it gives us that euphoric, that energized, that focus feeling, but also really changes our perception and some of the feelings when ingested, you know, this feeling of love and empathy, closer to others and inner peace. So the top view is actually what the molecule MDMA looks like. Image B is what methamphetamine looks like. And you can sort of see on the grayed out area would be the continuation of the MDMA molecule. And then image C is mescaline. And once again, the grayed out would be similar to the molecule. So as you can see, it really kind of brings attributes of both of those chemical substances. This sort of stops the history section of psychedelics. These are all books, though. These are resource guides for you guys to be able to use. These underlines are also, they're linkable. They go to Amazon in case you're interested in purchasing any of these books. The Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind, really kind of reset the trajectory of psychedelics. That was written in 2018. There's also a Netflix special he has that I highly encourage you to read the book, but if not, definitely watch the Netflix special. It's a 4-part series. It's incredibly well done. The acid revival is about the efforts that are going on today and how the medical community is really trying to legitimize and bring back the use of psychedelics. The Harvard Psychedelic Club is a fascinating story about Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, Dr. Andrew Weil, and really what happened then. And then Storming Heaven, LSD, The American Dream is a kind of a research book based around what was going on with LSD, not only in the society, the anti-war movement, the hippie culture, but also what the government was doing with MK Ultra and some of their experiments with using LSD as basically a biological, hopefully, they were wanting to use that as biological warfare, some type of chemical warfare. So this part is our brain on drugs. So just really, really simple kind of way for us to understand how our brain works. So we start with the neutron level, populations, they become regions, circuits, and then eventually networks. What's important to know is that these networks and these circuits are amazingly fluid. There's all kinds of flexibility here. So you can sort of see with this diagram how the lines, they connect and they connect and they connect. And so a lot of people, based on Michael Pollan's book and some other things, really, have this perception of, oh, I can just, break down my ego or reset my default mode network. And yes and no, right? So really what these psychedelics do, and I'm going to highlight this a little bit later in the presentation, is they really change the way these circuits connect and these circuits move around. So our default mode network being here in red, it basically the circuits around it change. So therefore the inputs and the outputs of the default network change. We actually don't dissolve any part of the brain network with the use of these substances. And then if we go even before neurons, right, what really starts all of this are these neurotransmitters. And that's really what these molecules and how they operate in our body, right? We talked about SPs, acting as massive amounts of serotonin being added to our system. By and large, SPs do not affect dopamine, LSD being the exception. It does activate the D1 and D2 dopamine pathways. And then there's also, differences with GABA, glutamate, and by no means are these all of the neurotransmitters that are affected. There's, oxytocin, there's norepinephrine, there's a laundry list of them, but that's really how these compounds interact within our body by either emulating these molecules or in causing releases of these molecules to happen. So, y'all being nurses, I'm sure you are aware that chronic stress is not good for us. And this slide, it really shows how chronic stress interacts or creates basically depression, and then also substance use disorder. So that repeated reoccurring of chronic stress, right, can increase substance use. It decreases our motivation to not use the substances. And then, anytime we're in a very stressful situation, a lot of times people will relapse. That was really my case with my alcohol use disorder, and psychedelics, right, really have the power to combat this chronic stress that really engulfs our day-to-day life now, and as living in this modern world. What chronic stress does specifically for our neurotransmitters. So it decreases serotonin, it decreases dopamine, and it causes mass fluctuations in glutamate and GABA. And really that, really has impacts, on mood, on our reward, our anticipation, and really kind of almost calcifies our neuroplasticity. So, that's really where these molecules really have the power, specifically speaking about depression, to really kind of help someone change their mindset. And this slide is, I think, really key to kind of understanding, bringing all this together. So our typical SSRI, so SSRIs interact with our 5-HT1 receptor. Okay, and so that is part of the limbic system. So basically your amygdala sends signals out, and that really puts us in fight or flight mode, right? That's our sympathetic nervous system is constantly engaged. So what the SSRIs do really is basically soften that feeling, right? They don't eliminate it in any way. It's more of like a blunting, right? So it shows down here, emotional blunting. So it allows us to tolerate more stress without actually changing what's kind of creating the stress in our brain in the first place. And so that's really, where psychedelics, really come into play, especially these SPs. So what it does is it creates, this mass firing throughout your cortex. So all your networks, this word, entropy. So which is really this just massive firing of all the circuits and all the networks. And that really allows your brain to really form new circuits and new pathways. It really makes you adaptable. So one of the analogies we like to use is, if you're skiing down a mountain and every day you ski the same route, right? You have these two trails, and so you're constantly like, this becomes the only way to get down the mountain is by following this one trail. What psychedelics can do is sort of put down some fresh snow by firing all this, and then allows you to maybe explore the mountain with different trails. And so you're still getting to the end of the mountain, but you're doing it in a different way, which ultimately, can break you out of that depression loop and really increase your well-being. So I love this image that's been developed to really kind of explain that. Also, so neuroplasticity, right? So we know that these psychedelics really have the ability to increase our neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity, right? It's really our brain growing and our brain strengthening. Its level of communication. This research honestly is probably less than a month old. This statement of LSD and psilocybin directly binding to the TKRB. So the TKRB is actually the receptor here on the synapses that the BDFN communicates with. So once the BDFN falls into the receptor, that triggers going here to mTOR, eventually to mTOR, and then creating neuroplasticity. So these are little bits of protein. And so that allows your brain to really grow and form new connections. So I think it's amazingly powerful. And like I said, this is mice models. This is all really new research, but 1,000 times greater than what we're traditionally using, the SSRIs, for this neuroplasticity. Also lack of BDNF, brain-derived nootropic factor, is, having less of that in your system, right, has really been shown to lend itself to a lot of psychological disorders from Alzheimer's, dementia, depression, Parkinson's. So all of those diseases can be attributed to, in some way, to the body's dysregulation of BDNF. So psychedelics being able to bring that forward really shows some great positivity in potentially dealing with those diseases. So up next is ketamine. Ketamine is very, very complex. I could probably spend several hours going into the deep dives of it, but what's important to know is it's dose dependent. And these numbers here, these 0.2 milligrams per pound, 0.5 milligram per pound. So that is based on administration through intramuscular injection. So an IM injection. So, this ratio is going to change depending on, how you dose the medicine, whether that's a nasal spray or a troche. But for IM, this is what it does. So at 0.2, it's just a pleasant altered state of consciousness. A larger dose is going to be a dreamlike experience. And then the highest dose, it actually becomes anesthesia. It's also, we're characterizing it as a rapid acting antidepressant. So the research is still really new on this, but it's really showing promising signs that one use of ketamine can really help someone break a suicidal thought pattern, which I think would be an amazing tool that practitioners hopefully would have the ability to use for people in those conditions, right? I'm very hopeful for that. And as I mentioned, it being complex, it affects almost every region of the brain. So ketamine is kind of its own animal. And like I said, we talked about it being a dissociative anesthetic, and I think that is really what it is. But at the same time, it does have some other properties as well. So finally, we have MDMA. I like the title. It induces an immensely good mood. I could have used the word profoundly there as well. So unlike the SPs, what MDMA does is it allows for the endogenous release. So what your body naturally has, what it naturally has in store for your serotonin, your dopamine, your norepinephrine. So it's not supplementing or adding these similar molecules to your system, but it's allowing your body to just release them. It also interacts with your 5-HT1B receptor. So that is oxytocin. What speaks to me most about MDMA is this idea of memory reconsolidation. So if you are in this state of bliss, but yet you can think about some trauma that's happened in your life, your brain kind of reassociates that trauma with a less traumatic state, this more blissful state that you are currently in. So by doing that, by reconfiguring that memory, really speaks to how it helps people to really overcome, the fear or that trigger that trauma, typically brings up when people think about it, and why, traditional talk therapy, right? It's so difficult to kind of get past that trigger moment. And that's really what MDMA can allow us to do. From that memory reconsolidation. And also, it has your amygdala release BDNF, which, brings up, as we mentioned, more neuroplasticity, which actually would extinguish sort of that fear response, that fear memory, that's sort of, that people, the loop that people get stuck into when they're addressing their trauma. So some subjective effects, right? So we need to kind of discuss this. So psilocybin, a typical journey, 4 to 6 hours. LSD is basically double that experience. Inhaled DMT is a 10 to 20 minute experience, but when you mix it with the kappa vine, which is the other half of ayahuasca, that experience, goes 6 to 8 hours. So that really goes to show how a MAOI can really impact this experience by taking a 15 to 20 minute experience and creating a 6 to 8 hour experience, and then mescaline 8 to 10 hours. One of the reasons why psilocybin is being so heavily researched, right, is because it is a 4 to 6 hour experience, right? It's much more permissible for the researchers to study a patient on a 4 to 6 hour journey as opposed to a 10 to 12 hour journey. So I think a lot of the research, we assume that maybe psilocybin is potentially, quote unquote better, but a lot of times the research is being dictated by money. And so it's more affordable and it's more, allows the researchers to do more because of that shorter, effect window. And then some effects, right? We have, visual imagery, of course, your sense of time, and then, potentially, right, the disillusion of your sense of self, what people sometimes refer to as ego death. So ketamine, the experience is really based around, how it's administered. So, sublingually, it's 1 to 4 hours, intranasal, same. And then IM or IV is about half that experience. Once again, it gives you this feeling of disassociation and detachment. I really like this word derealization, which really allows you to sort of view yourself as a dream. And then the other experience, right? This is why I think we should come up with a better name than a dissociative anesthetic. Is it does allow for this unity, this connectivity feeling, this mystical type experience to happen. And that's an incredibly powerful feeling and experience to understand that we're all connected and that we're all here together. And then lastly, we have MDMA, which is taken orally. Recreationally, I've seen some people rub it on their gums and in some different things, but clinically we do it orally. Euphoria, absolutely, increased empathy, And then due to the amphetamine component of it, right, we have this arousal and focus. Yet we also have this reduced anxiety feeling. So, that's a very unique feeling, being very focused and very relaxed, and very loving all simultaneously. So, what we refer to it as with my organization, right? We refer to it as the heart opener. And it really allows us to view ourselves and others around us through this lens of ultimately love. This is resources for part 2. Both of these images are linkable, and they will go to these 2 different pages. So the first gentleman here is Andrew Huberman. He has a very popular podcast called The Huberman Lab. He also does YouTube videos, but he is a great resource. He is a professor of ophthalmology and neurobiology at the Stanford School of Medicine. So really high level, really, detailed workings of how your brain and your visual cortex and all that interplay and work together. This other gentleman is Manesh Gurin. He has a YouTube channel called The Psychedelic Scientist, and he is a PhD candidate working at the University of San Francisco under the direction of Dr. Robin Carhart Harris. So both of these, I know books aren't for everyone, so these are more video and audio based reference material. They're both linked and they're both amazing resources. And it's amazing that this information is being put out there free. So let's look at some of the clinical findings. Also, so you'll notice under here in the citation, all of these pages that are underlined, so they have been linked to the published article, whether that's in PubMed or Nature, wherever they're found. So as you can see, right, these are all related to depression and the use of psilocybin. We can look at the sample size, the control, the dosage, endpoints, and then, the results, right? And for all of them, they were better than the control. This middle one here, so I'm not going to, escitalopram, I know it's an SSRI, was the control in this group. The control was not, primarily measurable. They have released some papers about this. So really the meat and the potatoes of this research project happened at the start of the COVID lockdown. And they really feel like that major stressor, and not only for the participants, but also for the researchers, probably seeped into the research of that. So they've sort of readdressed this, and I think they are recreating this experiment now with a much larger sample size. But this was a phase 1. So whatever it is, it ended up going to phase 2, and that's what's happening now is the phase 2 with this. This is, some of you may have heard of Compass, which is a company that has a unique psilocybin molecule or a way to deliver it. So that's who's funding that research there. So, but for major depression, treatment-resistant depression, some really good outcomes based on psilocybin. This research here is for end of life or life-threatening anxiety. So a lot of this research was done with people with terminal cancer, and so some really positive outcomes based on the use of that. So this first one here from 2011. This really showed that the dosage was probably too low. And as you can see, they've sort of increased the dosage since then on the psilocybin and have had really good results. The paper that really changed everything was this paper right here, this Roland Griffiths research paper from, it's in Maryland. I'll think of it in a second. So anyway, so he is a very well-known researcher, very stringent, very buttoned up, very highly professional. They brought him in to do this research specifically. And when he published the article, it talked about these individuals having mystical experiences. And that really sort of blew the doors open for the research. And people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, someone as rigid as Roland Griffiths, was able to conduct research that really, had all of this, I guess, medical terminology used. So that was really quite amazing, quite special. Unfortunately, Mr. Griffiths has stage 4 colon cancer. So his physical time on this earth is probably limited. But we owe him a debt of gratitude, and we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So I definitely have a lot of admiration and gratitude for the work he's done in this space. For substance use disorders, Matthew Johnson really utilized this in 2014, and we're doing phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials based around this now. So this ability to really help people with addiction dependency, right? So tobacco, alcohol, I can speak personally of what LSD did to me in my use disorder. But this is really hopeful, really good stuff. I do want to go back to, I mentioned earlier during the first part of this episode that there was over 1,000 research papers with more than 40,000 research subjects done before these molecules were scheduled 1. And as you can see, the sample sizes now are still relatively small. So it just, keep in mind that as this research comes out and they want to continue to do research, and then I'm all for that we have a large amount of research showing that these molecules have worked based on past data. But unfortunately, our government doesn't really allow for that kind of research to be brought into evidence in the current. And then final paper I wanted to share with you, and this is a really new paper, 2000, it came out this year. And this is showing psilocybin for the use of body dysmorphic disorder. So for those of you who may not be aware, anorexia nervosa is the most, about 10% of people who have anorexia end up, it's more morbidity. They die because of it. So it's as far as mental illness, right? It's the most fatal. So I think it's amazing that we're looking at these other groups, mostly, a lot of times it's women, and that we're able to use these powerful molecules to really help that. So currently there's over 250 trials involving SPs going on at clinicaltrials.gov. You can go there. It's a free website. Just, type in psilocybin, LSD, DMT, and it will show you all the clinical trials that are currently underway or about to get underway. Maybe one's by you, maybe you can become part of one, who knows? But I definitely encourage you to check out clinicaltrials.gov. So just to kind of summarize, the psychedelic experience is really going to be impacted, in this handful of ways. First off, it's the type of medicine we're utilizing. Dosage absolutely comes into play. I didn't really get to speak on environment and setting just due to time constraints, but that is, the environment you're in, whether you are in a therapeutic office or the woods out in nature or on a dance floor, all of that is going to greatly impact the experience. Also, right, your historical life experience, right? What kind of trauma you've had in the past, or what kind of inputs, or maybe it's not trauma, maybe it's just drama, maybe it's just how you were taught to see the world. Also plays a huge impact on your experience. And then finally, preparation, being prepared for this. Your dieta, your diet, I didn't even touch on, the gut-brain axis and how this all comes into play. And then finally, right after the experience, right, how are you integrating? How are you taking what you've learned in these new pathways, and how are you maximizing them or learning from them for your healing? So those are really the key components. Maybe I'll be able to come back and do a talk specific to preparation, integration, and environment. If you'd like to stay in contact with me, these are all linkable as well. Easiest way, honestly, is to you can book a complimentary call with me through my website or through my booking tool. It's very easy. And then, we can do just a chat between professionals. We can talk about your interest or any areas you may be, like to learn more. I'm also sort of active on LinkedIn. I'm sort of active on Instagram. It's social media. It is what it is. And this is also my website. So, and I guess, lastly, I just wanted to finish with this quote from Aldous Huxley. This speaks to me, and this is something that I really, convey to my clients as well, is there's only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. And that's really what I want to encourage you all to take away from today's topic. And ultimately, I hope you feel empowered to do what's best for your own health and wellness. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Great job, Coach Michael. That was amazing. And I'm just going to be quiet and let whoever would like to share, because we will be using you more, Coach Michael, in our network for sure, with your expertise. I like your, doing a course on set and setting for people that do want to explore deeper dives. If they're not going to be doing it, in a clinical setting, how would they might do it at home, as well as microdosing, and also endocannabinoid system and endocannabinoid dome care. What does that look like? The biopsychosocial spiritual aspects of healing, how we fold in nutrition and diet and movement and connection and rest, right? So those are all the things. So I think this will be we can expand on this over the next couple of months as we start to build out our psychedelic section within our network to help more people truly get access to these life-altering, transformational molecules that have had a huge impact on my life and the life of many of the patients that we've taken care of. And so extremely grateful for Coach Michael's introduction, Nurse Carrie Lee and Nurse Jamie, who are not here today. They're also psychedelic and cannabis nurses, introduced me to Coach Michael. And it's been a pleasure to work with you, learn with you, and to experience your coaching myself as a patient. So thank you.
It's very kind. So, yeah, did anyone have any specific questions? Or this was my first time giving that talk, so I hopefully it went well. And I'm excited to see the replay and figure out ways. We couldn't figure out how to do the notes, so I just really winged it.
Great. The notes didn't show up. So in other words,
I know, I took them off. So I was like, I'm just going to wing it because
great.
I sort of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I have a question.
Denise, how are you?
Michael, good to see you. It was fantastic. Very clear. Loved it. I have a question with alcoholism. So I'm curious, is when to enter somebody in with this, like if they are, let's say they are an alcoholic and they are having difficulty even getting help or really coming to grips with it and determining like, yes, I need to do something with this. And they are still drinking, they are still like in the throes of it. Are they bringing in like the psilocybin or the LSD while they're still in that state to get them to the point where they feel they can get help? Or do you wait until they are in more of, obviously you want them hooked up with a therapist or what have you, but if they are actively in some kind of a alcohol treatment program, or maybe, I don't even know if AA even allows, they probably don't even allow this, right? So I'm just wondering about if it's better to be detox first, or, what
Yeah.
are we seeing a pathway with
Yeah.
somebody with alcohol? Is
Yeah.
there a path yet?
Yeah. That's Denise. Thank you for that question. And like I said, this is my opinion. This is not medical advice. Okay. I just want to preface that. So ultimately, for me, I had to have the desire. I wanted to stop. And we can actually historically look back. So AA, the 12-step program, is really a blueprint to sort of bring someone to a spiritual, thing to where they don't need it in their lives. And Bill W., one of the founders of AA, actually used LSD to break his alcohol addiction. And so what he thought for the AA model was to use the psychedelics to get people to the first step. So the first step is relinquish yourself to a higher power. But if you don't believe in a higher power, how can you relinquish? Like, how can you truly believe that? And so his thought process developing this was, let me give them the psychedelics so they can see that there is a higher power, right? Let them feel that there is a higher power. And then we can work this 12-step program. And the 12 steps are actually effective if you the motto is, it works if you work it, right? And so there's that. But like I said, I think it starts with a desire to change. Now clinically, what's going on is I'm assuming they are finding people who want to change, right? That's the goal. And they are doing 2 psilocybins, and you can click on the paper, right? But what they're doing is 2 psilocybin journeys about 14 days apart, 10 to 14 days apart. And that's allowing the people to sort of rewire their system. So for me personally, right? So what I was doing specifically was I had an event when I was 14 years old. I had never drank alcohol before. And I was an awkward teenager. Most young men are. I was overweight. I was redheaded. I had buck teeth at that time in my life. And so I went to a party where an older friend of mine's brother had bought us beer. So I carried beer into the party. And for the first time in my life, like, I felt cool. People were high-fiving me. The girls were, hugging me and telling me how special I was. So because of that, right, I got in that loop. And now I was replaying that event in my life over and over and over and over again. I didn't even realize it. That's what I was doing. But that's why I always was like, let's go to the bar. Let's go have a drink, because that made me feel cool. And that when I realized that, right, and when that medicine made me realize that I was on this loop and that I was replaying that memory over and over, I was like, oh, I'm done with this. I totally can handle this now. Like, I know it's like not something I should be doing. And that's really, what it did for me. But I think ultimately, to be more direct to answer your question, right, I think you have to be willing to want to change. And if you're not willing to put in the work, then it's probably, I think, it might, I don't know. But I think honestly, for me, you need to want to change first, and then use these medicines as a tool to make that change happen, in a more elegant and in a more refined way. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. Well, and I think too, is like, there's a reason you're drinking, just like you pointed out. And for somebody, it may be some subconscious, some childhood trauma or what have you. And the psychedelics can help you with a therapist unearth that and figure, come to understanding of that. And that also can help you with, like you did, letting go of the alcohol. You may be able to, let go of the alcohol, but if you haven't figured out why you were drinking in the first place, you're still not feeling good, right? So it's seeing where the psychedelics, like kind of before getting them there, but definitely through, the process would be beneficial.
Okay, have a couple more questions after you're done, Denise. Okay, so there was another question we have. Thank you for the great introduction. What SPs are you using in your practice, and how are legal restrictions limiting your care? That was one question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do a lot of work with functional health and the use of microdosing. And I believe in microdosing LSD. I think it's a better molecule for several reasons. One being the half-life, it lasting 12 hours. The other, right, is that it impacts your dopamine system, right? So if you're trying to create new habits or minimize habits, right, by knowing how to leverage your dopamine, right, that's sort of the reward pathway for this. Also it bypasses your GI tract, so you don't get that bloating. So I utilize that LSD for microdosing, and then for larger journeys, MDMA and psilocybin is really what I do on those more ceremony. Well, I call them ceremonies because that's what that is to me. But for the transformational journey, I use those two medicines. So, like I said, all of these medicines have, specific uses based on the person, right? We're all bio-individual. So what works for me might not necessarily work for you or work for others. So, but, for me, like once I found out what worked, I was like, oh, wow, this works. And I really just encourage my clients to, let's start small. Let's start with these microdosing steps. Let's see how you do. Let's get you into this, looking at your life holistically, right? These medicines are magic, but they're not a magic cure, right? You have to put in the work too, right? You got to eat healthier. You got to not doom scroll on your phone. You got to get good sleep. Like all of this comes into play. So, if we can start to build those habits through microdosing and then really go, and that really leads to the preparation of the experience. And then, feeling comfortable around the medicines, all of this, and then we can have those more transformational experiences. And then after that, it's really just, let's integrate and let's take those lessons and let's fine tune your life as the best we can.
Good. And then there was another question, I think again from Cindy, is coaching aimed toward self-experiencing? Is that what you were asking, Cindy?
Well, so hi. So, with how can a person access? I mean, a lot of these medications are still illegal, right? I mean, I don't know much about MDMA or ketamine and how a person accesses those. I'm in Colorado, so I can access psilocybin's getting everywhere, but it's legal to grow my own psilocybin.
It's decriminalized, right? You're allowed to do all that.
That's it. Okay. Yep. So in places where you don't, I mean, how do you even help somebody that they've got to figure out how to obtain their own medicine, and then they can get coaching from somebody like yourself to experience that.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. That's really what I do. But part of my coaching, right, is I've built a network of different sources, and I really help people find vetted, trusted people that I trust, and allow them to communicate and interact with those individuals, right? It's definitely we're definitely
model, right, Coach Michael? We call it the caregiver model. It's a lot of what we do sometimes in cannabis nursing. There's a lot of people that need a lot of help that are in illegal states. So how can we plug them into vetted caregivers that's private, safe, high quality, tested medicine, people that care? So caregivers came before us as clinicians. Think about it. Yeah. I didn't learn what I learned in a course, in a book, in a webinar. I learned from the people that were making these medicines and caring for individuals for years and years and years and years. So these are the people that I turn to oftentimes too, for myself and for other clients that I've developed really trusting, loving relationships with, and they care. So we as nurses and clinicians can vet these caregivers and to help patients get access to these safe medicines with the appropriate coaching. We're not all about, here's a link, go get your mushrooms. No, that's irresponsible. We're all about, you need to understand how and why these substances work in your body and why you might want to explore them, right? So it's really, it's very different. You think about in conventional care, we're focused on body parts, right? We're focused on pharmaceuticals, do this, do that. If we're lucky, we get to mental, emotional health, and rarely do we ever get to spiritual health. Well, in the plant medicine world, we connect with patients first, connect with them spiritually, and help them to mentally, emotionally process, to be able to make choices for them that are going to impact their physiological processes in their life to work with those symptoms. So it's a different kind of approach, and it is very touchy because of the legality of it. So when we're working with patients, we're very honest and very transparent.
Yeah. Thank you. That's well said. Because listen, that resonates with me. I live in North Carolina, right? Even cannabis is against the law here. Yeah. So, I mean, it's wild to think about, right? Like I'm very excited to get to go to Denver in a couple of weeks for the MAPS conference. I'm excited to see like how the real world actually lives.
Yeah. It's going to be really exciting. There's a group of nurses that are going to be there. They're called Open.
Okay.
So they're entheogenic nurses that are working with psilocybin. And I also know Cannabis Nurses Network is going to be there as well. So I'll make sure you have access.
Yeah. Please plug me in. I want to meet all the good people and see how we can work together to help as many people as we can.
All right. If those are the end of the questions, I am going to stop the recording. Oh, Elizabeth has a question. Here we go.
Okay.
So when SPs activate these receptors, they trigger the release of serotonin flooding through the system. Does this pharmacology work similar to cannabinoids? For example, when we take THC, it plugs into the CB1 receptor, very similar to how anandamide, right? So anandamide gets released, nudges the receptor, but if we take THC, it plugs in a little bit longer. So does psilocybin do the same thing to those receptors, which is why we're not over high on serotonin all the time? Did I ask that right?
Yeah. That's great. And that's it. Right. And that's why ultimately, right, the different SPs have different, effect periods, right? So they think because LSD has that longer tail with the nitrogen, it sort of goes into the receptor and like gets jammed. And so it lasts for like 12 hours as opposed to psilocybin, which doesn't have that tail that I think it's nitrogen. Listen, I'm not a chemist. And that's why it only lasts, or that's why it lasts 4 to 6 hours, while DMT doesn't have that tail at all. And it only lasts a very short amount of time. So it's very similar to the way the locking key of your ECS would work. Same principles, right? These molecules, these receptors, these neurotransmitters. So yeah, that's great that Elizabeth picked up on that.
Yeah. All right. So this has been amazing. We're not going to hang up yet. I'm just going to close the recording. So for those that are new here, I want you to reach out to Michael if you have any questions. The PDF will be in the network. We're opening up a new psychedelic section within the network where we are going to be putting all of the videos that we've recorded so far. We're going to be putting the PDF in there, and we are going to be we're going to work with Coach Michael to start a support group for those that are interested in joining and meeting monthly to just chat about experiences. So this has been an episode, our first psychedelic workshop with Coach Michael launching it. We're extremely grateful. And I'm going to end this presentation here. And thank you all for joining us.